Everyone. Me and my wet hair. How was everybody doing tonight? Coming in right on time at 9 o'clock, although it was not easy. I was actually on the phone until about 8:37 tonight, and I still had to jump in the shower and shave. So I had to rush as usual. I thought I was going to have plenty of time, and then a disappearance that we are working on from the 1970s. The person who was probably going to be the guest wanted to have a little bit of a talk, and I said, sure. And we went for about 15 minutes and probably went as long as I could go and still make it here on camera on time. Hope everybody's doing well. This is the Unfound Live Show for June 3rd, 2020. And I see Angela in here, so I think she was first. We got Concha. We got, let me turn this. Hold on a second. Let me turn this a little bit. It's a little bright. That is a little bright. Okay. We got Concha, Laura, Angela, Suzanne, Jasmine, Kathy, Susan, Michelle, Sharon. And do not forget, while you are watching tonight, to like this video. Of course, on my screen, it shows as a thumbs up, just like this. So make sure you like this video. It helps the channel, not just this video, but the whole channel, become more visible to more people. Before I get started, I made a promise that I was going to give a shout out to a young man, and I'm going to do that right now. He is the son of a longtime Patreon supporter. In fact, I think she was one in that first, when I first started on Patreon, must have been in late 2017 or something. I think she was one of the first people to sign up, and she has been a very strong supporter ever since. Well, she has a son. His name is JoJo. And I was talking to her. I'll just say her first name. Her name is Andrea. I was talking to Andrea yesterday because I discovered that she was not in the Unfound think tank on Facebook, the very, very private group. And so we started talking, and we ended up talking about her son, JoJo, who is 11 years old, and she was telling me about him. And he is a big fan of the program, just like his mother is. And what she told me is that he keeps a notebook on all of Unfound's disappearances. And that really blew me away. I think that was made me, humbled me quite a bit. And so, JoJo, I just want to say hi to you. Thank you for listening. Thank you for taking an interest in the program that we do. Thank you for taking an interest in the disappearances. Andrea, thank you for allowing your son to listen to this program. Andrea did say that it's easy to allow her son to listen to this program because it's always PG, whether it's the episodes or this live show. We're always doing things PG rated, even though we do cover some very adult topics. We try to do it in a PG related way. So, JoJo, I want to just say hi to you. Thank you for taking an interest. I hope you're doing well. Your mother tells me that maybe you want to become a police officer or a detective, investigator, something like that. And if you're already doing a notebook on missing persons cases at 11 years old, then I think you're well on your way. So please keep it up. We'll keep doing the episodes, and you just keep doing that notebook. And it's great to hear about this. And Andrea, I want to thank you for, of course, your support since the beginning. And I thank you for telling me about your son, who is keeping a notebook on all of the disappearances. And I hope he is watching tonight, or at least he'll catch it later. When this is finished, if you watch it later. So, JoJo, shout out to you. See who else is in here. Elizabeth, Michelle, Carrie. Hello, Cherie. Pamela, Ina, first time to comment. Thank you, Ina. First time to comment. I was going to say, I don't remember an Ina, I-N-A being in here, but Ina, hello. Kathy, Michelle, LaFord, thank you all for joining in and watching tonight. It was kind of an ugly day here in Madeira Beach, and it was raining. It was very overcast. There were some people on the beach earlier, but then it got a little ugly. And then I think at the time that I was, just as the sun was going down, I don't think anybody was out there. Nobody was checking out the sunset because there was no sunset to see. It was all clouds. So I've just been inside today. I was listening to the interview that will be that will play for Friday's episode. And that episode did most of the recording that I have to do. The interview came out really well, and I've already done an interview for next Friday's episode as well. I like to get ahead a little bit. I don't like to get too much ahead, but right now we're at least a little bit ahead for next week. So that's what's been going on here. So somebody asked me where I want to go next with this is earlier today. I think it was on the Unfound page on Facebook. Somebody asked me, what is this thing about the camel? What is that? Well, that is, that started, I don't know how long ago, maybe a year ago, but there is a listener. Her name is Dee, although she doesn't do it anymore. But it used to be when it would be Wednesdays for the live show, she would post something with the camels in the picture and then write something on it. And it was pretty funny. And it kind of just caught on. It really comes from that Geico commercial with the camel. Of course, the Geico commercials also have the gecko and some other things, but it really started with that commercial with the camel walking through the office for a Geico commercial, and he's asking everybody what day it is. Well, since the live show is always on Wednesdays, it kind of became a thing with Dee posting with the camel in the group, and it kind of catching on. So every Wednesday when I post the link to this live show, I always have to comment on the camel. It's something I try to be funny. I'm not saying it's always funny, but I try to be funny. This week it was something about the camel riding there, Pamela. There you go. About the camel riding this new bike that I got, and I did get a new bike because this summer I want to be able to ride down on the beach for some exercise, and I got it, I don't know, a little over a week ago. And so I thought it'd be funny to talk about the camel trying to ride my bike. I think that also must have been maybe a month ago or longer when it started getting really nice out. I talked about the camel wearing a Speedo down on the beach and all sorts of crazy things. So that's what that is. That is where the camel reference comes from. Let's move on. So I needed to, hello, little bit. Hello, Paula, Ann. Good to see all of you. Let's move on to this. The newsletter came out this last Friday, and I hope you got it. If you're on the list, you should have gotten it. And it was a good one, over 4,000 words. Did a little commentating, let everybody know kind of what's been going on here or there. And it went well. It was good. Worked on it on Friday, Saturday, Sunday, Monday. Can't do that all in one day. So we got it done. I got it done over a course of a few days. And I usually come up with the topics that I'm going to write about before I sit down and write them. Hello, Christine. You don't have to apologize, Christine. Charmin. Hello, Charmin. I haven't seen Charmin in here in a while. Hello, Charmin. Great to see you in here. Astrid from Iowa. Elizabeth is asking me, have you heard about the new development? I am going to talk about that tonight. My assistant Cherie let me know about it. And then Natasha also sent me something about it. I don't know any more than any of you do, but I will comment on it before we are done tonight. Hello, Barbara and SB. There she is. There's who I was just talking to at 8:30 tonight. There you are, Stephanie. Thanks for tuning in. I made that suggestion before we got off the phone. So thanks for making time, Stephanie. Hello, Barbara. So the newsletter came out. If you didn't get it, that means you're probably not on the list. And to get on the list, all you have to do is email me and I will put you on the list. Just email me privately at unfoundpodcast.com and we can get that done. We have a pretty long list of people who get the newsletter. It's growing every month, and I don't spam people like every day sending them things. It's just really the newsletter. And I think I emailed everybody right before I got interviewed by Dr. Telesco. And I also, I think, emailed them before I was on the game show. But other than that, it's just really the newsletter every month. At least that's the way I think of it. If you'll hold on for a second, I see my battery power and I find that my computer is unplugged. Hold on just a moment. There we go. All right, there we go. I was getting a little worried about that. I was like, what the heck is going on? And then I have this, one of those power strips down here, and I just happened to notice that the connection for my MacBook that I'm now using for all live stuff was not plugged in. And I was getting worried the battery power is going down. I was like, what the heck's going on? Okay. Hello, Tanya. What's going on, Tanya? From Ohio, a state I know very well, being from Western Pennsylvania. I have a sister that lives in Ohio, Tanya. She lives in Canfield, Ohio, right next to the fairgrounds there. Been there many, 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 many times. Thank you, Sharon. I appreciate that. So once again, if you're interested in the newsletter, find out maybe some things you didn't know about, then you should contact me and I will make sure you get the latest newsletter from June for 2020. Those newsletters come out every first of the month. We started out doing like in the middle of the month, but then I converted to just doing them and having them come out at the first of the month, which I think makes a lot more sense. So I enjoy writing them. That's one thing about doing this program, even though people think, well, it's mostly Ed talking and interviewing people and the people talking. Between the newsletter and writing those blogs that I do for Patreon, of course, patreon.com/Unfound Podcast, if you'd like to become a member. It does keep my writing sharp. That's why probably on top of being able to comment and maybe teach some people some things and let them know what's going on inside of my head regarding all these disappearances that we cover. It keeps my writing sharp because I think maybe at least a few of you know that I have written some novels in my life. I've written books going all the way back to the 1990s. And then I was writing some screenplays when I was doing some independent films in Las Vegas, and the films were not very good. But then I came here to Florida, and I've done a lot of writing. I've written 5 novels, essentially, starting in like 2010 when I lived in Las Vegas, up until about when I started Unfound in 2016. I wrote quite a bit. And so being able to write those blogs and putting my thoughts into words, I think has kept my writing decently sharp. I think I could always work on my editing. So I love doing the newsletter and I love doing the blogs. And once again, patreon.com/Unfound Podcast. If you'd just like to see the blogs, it's just $2 a month, 50 cents a week. That's it. just to read what I have to say about all of the disappearances that we cover. And you'd automatically get access to the blogs going way back to August of 2017. So it's a lot of reading. Each one of them is, the average is easily over 3,000 words. So I think that's pretty good. And you get a free ebook too of your choice. And then there's a $5 level, and then the $12 and the $20 level. Of course, the $5, get the blogs, you get a few more ebooks. $12 a month, that you get all the blogs, even more ebooks for free. Well, you're paying, the monthly, but that's what you get. But then you also get access to the think tank that we always talk about, that I always talk about on here. I talk about it. Of course, we conduct it on Sunday evenings at 7 p.m. Eastern. And of course, the new program, Unfound on the Ground, those people also get access to that now. Although that is not weekly. I think that's going to be maybe twice a month. And I'll be talking about that in a moment. And then if you really want to step up at $20 a month, then you become eligible for some actually signed printed copies of the books and t-shirts and some other things. So it just depends on what you can afford. But $2 a month is plenty. Just to have you as a supporter of the program would be great. Let's talk about the poll from this last disappearance that we covered with Shalva Rafty. Of course, her sisters. It was interesting doing interview with two people at one time, but I thought it went really, really well. Although I don't know when I'll be doing that again, but should the opportunity present itself, I think I could see us doing that again. It certainly made it easier, being that they were both in the same house and they were on different phones. That certainly made it easier than if I had to, a three-way call. But the poll regarding Shalva is a large majority of you believe that her boyfriend at the time, John Parra, had something to do with her disappearance. Large majority of you in the discussion group. And then maybe and no kind of were like neck and neck, but well back. I think 85% of people or something like that said that John Parra had something to do with her disappearance. I will tell you honestly, I'm not as convinced. I think it's totally reasonable to think that John had something to do with her disappearance. It makes a lot of sense, especially considering we know of these kinds of disappearances where a woman disappears and the guy's like, I don't know, she just walked off. The reason I kind of am not as convinced as I am in those other types of situations is because in all those other situations, it seems the woman was trying to get out of the relationship. Most recently, Christy Nichols, Danielle Sleeper, they were trying to get out of their relationships. And we believe that the men in their lives didn't want them to do that. And so things just went too far. Whereas with Shalva, she was trying to stay in the relationship. And I just don't think John wanted to have anything to do with her anymore. So that weighs on me, not heavily, but it does weigh on my decision making. In the group, they were also, it wasn't a total consensus. There were people who made the very good argument that John did something to Shalva, but a lot of people also believe that he didn't. So just depends. And this is once again one of those times where the think tank differs from the general population. It's just the way things go. Tanya, nice. I'm 15 minutes away from Canfield. I love the fair. Tanya, that's interesting. Only 15 minutes away. Okay, I've never asked you to in the Youngstown area. Okay, I've been over there, Tanya, taking the turnpike over and getting off at the second exit, I think, in Ohio, and Tippecanoe Road, and going over there to get to my sister's house. Charmin says, love the hair. Well, it loves you right back, Charmin. It's going to keep growing because I'm not going to get it cut. It just doesn't, I was, like I said, I was just a little rushed tonight, but that's okay. Doing unfound work. I was not going to be had to talk to Stephanie, who's watching here tonight, and I'm glad we talked, and I hope to talk to her again soon. But when people want to talk, that always gets put up to the first spot over just about anything else that goes on in my life, whether it has to do with Unfound or something else. If somebody wants to talk, some family member, a future guest, a prior guest, somebody that's working on something for Unfound, they always I will always pick up the phone for them. Thank you for listening to that, Cherie. Michelle, don't forget to give this podcast a thumbs up. Yes, thank you. Thank you again, Michelle. Yeah, the thumbs up. I want to say that again, being that since I said that, a lot of now people or more people are in here. Yes, please like this video and subscribe to the channel. We have over 8,000 subscribers to this channel now, which to me is crazy. I love it. Probably never could have imagined it when I started the Unfound channel way back whenever that was, but I think it certainly has helped what Natasha has been doing with the channel over the last 4 or 5 months. That certainly has helped. So yes, do not forget to like this video while you're watching it. Hello, Jill, new mama Jill. There she is. Great to see you. Pamela says she's in Warren, Ohio. Oh yeah, I've been to Warren, Ohio. And of course, Pamela, you know that we covered a disappearance from that area, Charlotte Paulus, going way back to the spring of 2017. So if you haven't checked that disappearance out, you should. You're welcome, Charmin. Yeah, my job is to remind. Thank you, Michelle. Hired myself. Yeah, so thank you, Michelle. But there's the poll. So let's move on to something else. I was asked a question. Let me see if I can find it. Hold on just a second. I was asked a question, a very interesting one, and I've had a chance to kind of think about it, and it has to do with suspecting certain people in disappearances, and really, should we be so quick as to think certain people are suspicious just because they might be different? Let me get here. Gina, Jeanna, has a very good question I will get to next. Okay, Elaine asked me this. I'm going to read the entire question. Now, she does mention one of Unfound's disappearances, but it's in the wider context of a theme. Just been listening to the Aaron Gilbert case. Of course, that's a disappearance from way back in the 1990s. She disappeared from Girdwood, Alaska. Her sister Stephanie was on. This is one where there's absolutely no clues. She just vanished. Therefore, the behavior of the guy she was with has been examined and judged. Should he have separated from her? Why didn't he ask someone for help? It seems we all get hung up on behavior and how we should act. In some cases, people have been made out to be guilty just based on impressions, example, appearance. Do any cases stand out where focusing on someone just because they were a little different or unlikable has delayed or prevented a case from being resolved, and it was actually someone else who had committed the crime? I think this is a very fair question, Elaine. And this is why the way we do interviews is that we don't go after people. All right. I never want to, Steve Pankey. Yeah, it was on my list. Thank you, Sheree. But I want to add some context for this before I answer the question. You have to remember, Elaine, that we don't go after people on Unfound. I believe that it is absolutely moral, ethical, and legal to say where the person was going, who the person was with, who they were in a relationship with, what was going on in that relationship. I believe that is all fair game. That does not necessarily mean that I think that person had something to do with the disappearance. So I don't want anybody ever to think that when we cover any particular disappearance, it's because we think somebody acted strange. The only reason we are talking about those people is because they were in the missing person's life. Because that person, that man, and that guy in Aaron Gilbert's case was with her at the time of her disappearance. That's the only reason we're talking about him. We're not talking about him because he lived 1,000 miles away. We're talking about him because he was with Aaron that day. Now, does that mean he had something to do with her disappearance? Not necessarily. Then we go to the next step. Well, what did he do? What did he say? What did he say to Stephanie? What did he say to the rest of Aaron's family? What did he explain here? And ultimately, it's up to the people to decide if he's guilty, if he did something to Aaron or not. It's in the end, it's just circumstantial. But we surely can talk about this person. In fact, one of the big problems I have with missing persons articles is because they don't say these things. They don't say, well, she left and she left, and doesn't say where the woman was going, doesn't say who she was with. Now, I think an editor of a newspaper would say, well, we don't do that because we're afraid of, getting sued or something like that. There's nothing, as long as you're not lying, there's nothing to worry about. As long as whatever sort of media, website, blog, podcast, TV show, as long as you aren't lying, you don't have nothing to worry about. So to take that to the next step, Elaine, and to answer your question, you have to remember something. None of us, except for the guests, maybe, none of us were there. So this is one person's interpretation of how that person was acting or what they were saying. Do I sometimes think that families blow it out of proportion? Yes, I do. I do think that sometimes families will say, well, he was acting suspiciously. Well, what does that mean? What was he doing that was actually suspicious? Well, he didn't want to talk to us. Well, maybe he was embarrassed. That doesn't mean necessarily that he caused somebody's disappearance. But so I do think I just don't want anybody to think that I automatically buy in anytime somebody says, well, this person was acting suspiciously. I don't. And in fact, I think is any interviewer out there when it comes to any types of true crime, I think I really tried to play devil's advocate and try to look at things a different way. Maybe not so much on the interviews, but certainly behind the scenes. And I think a lot of guests would tell you that. In fact, Stephanie, who is I was just talking to tonight about a disappearance we hope to cover in the next few weeks for Unfound. She knows that, I don't want to get into so much of it right now, but, we go through some different scenarios. It very well could be that this family member of hers just walked off, or maybe got put in witness protection, or maybe he was murdered. We just don't know. And so we just try to look at it as rationally and logically as we can. So, but a specific case, I think Cherie has already brought it up, and that was Steve Pankey. Yes, I think Steve is just a strange guy. That's not illegal. That doesn't mean he killed anybody. So I do think, given the attention that Janelle Matthews' disappearance has gotten, that a lot of people think he did kill Janelle. Whereas having talked to him, having interviewed him, I don't. And I think that all of this attention that he's gotten has mainly been brought on by himself, not by any evidence. It's been mainly brought on by himself. Now, I would say in that case, he has acted strangely, but it's not because I think he's guilty. I think that Steve is just a little bit of a different guy. I got along with him just fine. I think he answered every question that I asked him in the email, although I've not talked to him through email recently. All the emails I've had with him have been cordial and everything else. But yes, on the other hand, I wouldn't call him Mr. Personality. So I think it is possible for me and the public in general to, if they're presented with the evidence, if they're presented with an interview where I think this strange person answers all the questions, I think that if the person comes across as being truthful, if their answers make sense and everything, I think it's very possible for people to think that somebody is strange or their behavior is strange, but still believe that the person is innocent. But it takes a certain way to do that. I don't think that's automatic. And I think, once again, I think that the perfect example of that is Steve Pankey. Now, another situation I could bring up, kind of an unfound disappearance also, is Zoe Campos. Truthfully, at the time, I was a little suspicious of this half-hour phone call that she had with one of her mother's friends, this guy that was much older. She was on the phone with this guy for a half hour. To this day, we still don't know what that phone call was. What we do know is that he didn't have anything to do with her disappearance. Carlos Rodriguez, at least that's the way he's been charged, hasn't been brought to trial yet. She was found in the backyard of Carlos Rodriguez's house. She wasn't found in the backyard of this other guy's house. But there's a perfect example where the guy said after the fact, I was so drunk, I don't even remember talking to her. I don't know what we talked about. I had a blackout. And at the time, it certainly seemed suspicious. But looking at it, I don't know how you couldn't think it was suspicious. But we didn't do that on purpose. Those were just, a guy's talking to a young woman who he knows, who disappears right after she was talking to him on the phone. And then he claims he can't remember what the discussion was. What logically are you going to think? You're going to logically think that something happened, but it's not because I know the guy. I don't know the guy. The reason we think that way is because of the information presented. So I'm sure, Elaine, there are many more examples of that. I don't know how many of those examples are in Unfound's world because most of the cases we've covered are still unsolved. So to really in-depth answer your question, there would have to be more solved unfound disappearances so we could, have a bigger sample of cases to really look at that and say, are we being led astray because we think people are acting suspiciously when we should have been looking in some other direction? Maybe. I just don't think that we have enough information right now to make that decision. Maybe we could think of another example, a very good example that everybody knows. What about the Atlanta bombing? What about that in 1996? The FBI went after that security guard. What was his name? And I'm forgetting. And I know the movie just came out with Clint Eastwood directing within the last so many months or something. I did not see it. I heard it wasn't a very good movie, but I don't know. I didn't see it. But the truth is, even the FBI went after him. Why? Because they thought he was a little strange. They thought he was trying to play hero, set the bomb off and then save people and become a hero. That was what they thought. And I think there's even evidence there that they continued to go after him even after there was evidence that he didn't do it, which is something that I can assure you Unfound will never do. So there are certainly examples of this. But I don't know if, I think you just have to look at it this way. As I continue to say, We don't go after people. We talk about information, and we can't help it if it does make some people look more guilty than others. That doesn't mean they are. It just means that this is the information, and the information is pointing in this direction. So I hope that answers your question, Elaine. Tanya says, yes, I know exactly where that is. We used to live near Rite Aid and Walgreens on Tippecanoe. I know where that is, Tanya. That's weird. Yes, okay. Tippecanoe and Tyler too. Stephanie giving me a bunch of thumbs up. Thank you. Kristen says, I like how you always say we and never I. It shows how much you appreciate your team. I do appreciate my team. That's true. Thank you, Charmin. Thank you, Cherie. Thank you, Kristen. Charlotte. Charmin said Charlotte Paulus. Yes, he said her husband says she went out and just left. Maybe, probably not, but maybe. And that's a disappearance in the Canfield, Youngstown area. I think that, what was that? Girard, Ohio, maybe. Astrid says, do you know if in Amanda Fravel's case, the police were able to get a composite sketch of Lou Frank? They were not. No. Lou Frank is still a mystery. We're not even sure if that's his real name. Thank you, Cherie, for Atlanta bombing Richard Jewell. Thank you. And yes, it was Sharman. It was Eric Rudolph, who was the guy who was actually guilty, and he ended up being caught later. Cherie, Louis, Ellie knows who Frank is, but getting the records has been a big issue. Right. Yes. Cherie said, reading my mind, was just thinking about Zoe Campos. Yeah, I think about her a lot too, Cherie. Kristen says, I remember an interview you did, and the truck was found in a ravine with a body in it. Did you ever find out who was in the truck? Nope, that's still outstanding. That is still a case that Ron McNutt is who you're talking about, Kristen. And it's still out there, and it sucks. It just sucks. You're right. Elizabeth says Paul Paulus's family helped him with that murder. Well, we just don't know that, Elizabeth, but I can hear. I know why you're saying that. Let's move on to some other things. I'd mentioned, I don't know if it was last week or at least within the last couple weeks, that there was a guy who was photographed in the San Francisco area who some people think may be Cameron Remmer. I want you to know, for the record, I hope it is Cameron, even though the work that we did last year trying to track down these security guards, and one of them told Cameron's mother that I'm a complete kook and everything else. And then the other one who had one email exchange with Cherie, then he started not returning her emails. Certainly doesn't look good. Certainly could lead us to believe that something regarding them did happen. But I want you to know, I never mind being wrong. And I certainly hope that it is Cameron. But if you got the newsletter, I think I wrote in there why I think probably it isn't. And as I reiterated, I hope it is Cameron. But after a while, you hear so much about homeless people and how they are a missing person. And I believe there are missing people who are homeless. But it is amazing to me how many stories I've heard over the last 3.5 years where a family hears, oh, my son or daughter is out in the street and somebody saw her, and I'm going to go, and he's in this area, and all I have to do is go find him, and he's there all the time, and they'll go there, and nobody will be there. Nobody that looks like their son or daughter is there. Can't tell you how much that happens. Now, I know a lot of you are going to think of Claudia Wells because of what her daughter Robin has been, trying to find her mother for over 20 years. Certainly that does come to mind as well, but hers is just one example. There are many examples like that. So that's instantly what goes into my mind when I think about this. Cameron's missing, and I write about it in a lot more detail in the newsletter, but I just want you to know right now that there's no more information. In fact, just a couple days ago, through Messenger, I spoke with Valerie's mother, and there seems to be some missing persons. San Francisco PD does have a missing persons unit, luckily, although they didn't do a very good job back in 2011. But they do have somebody that is now trying to find this guy who was photographed. If I hear anything, I'll let you know. Once again, I hope it is Cameron. I just think there are some solid reasons to believe that it's not. Could totally be wrong. Could totally be wrong. So, but that's the update on Cameron Remmer. And if I find out anything, I won't wait till on Wednesday night live show to tell you. If it turns out whether they determine that it is Cameron or not, all of you will be the first ones to know, and I will post it in the group and on the Facebook page. Let's move on to something else. Unfound on the ground. Of course, we've already talked about patreon.com/Unfound Podcast. But for those of you who are Think Tank members, who are at the premium level of $12 a month or above on Patreon, I believe that the next Unfound on the ground will be happening Monday, June 15th. So like a week and a half from now. And I'm not sure about the time. Of course, it will be in the evening. So I'm guessing 7 o'clock, 8 o'clock, 9 o'clock, somewhere in there. The reason that we're deciding to move it to Monday, and I expressed this, and Eric agrees with me, being that he hosts it, is that it's just a lot to ask of people to be tuned in for the Think Tank at 7, do a lot of thinking and typing for maybe an hour and 15 minutes, and then expect them to go right into another program where they're going to be doing kind of the same thing, but from a different angle. It's just a lot to ask to take up 2.5 hours of people's time all in a row, especially when we are expecting them to be engaged. Now, if something more like this, where people type in some comments and talk back to each other, and maybe many of you are watching this or listening to this in your car, and of course we do have some interaction, but that's not really what the live show is. Whereas the Think Tank and the Unfound on the ground, they're different types of programming where audience participation is wanted and needed. So I think it's just a lot to ask. So that's why we're going to, I think, move it to Monday and see how that works out. Close. Yes, sure. You're right. Close to 30 in the Think Tank. Now, yes, that's how many people we now have eligible at the premium level and above in the Think Tank. Of course, the Think Tank group is very, very private. It's for people who are at the $12 a month level and above. It's an easy way for me to communicate with them, and through Patreon as well. And it's so private that you can't even search for it on Facebook, and you can't request to be in there. That's how shielded it is. And yes, we do have almost 30 people in there, and I'm really happy about that. I updated that just yesterday, Cherie, kind of going through and making sure everybody who should be in there was in there. And there are some people who aren't Patreon supporters that I had to take out, but that's the way it goes. Kristen says, I'm looking forward to participating right now. Unfortunately, I can't participate due to my job. Well, I'm sorry to hear that, Kristen. It's just tough. Not any day or any time is going to be perfect for everyone. At some point, we just have to make a decision. And I apologize for that. Not that anyone cares. I can't participate, but myself, I look forward to it. Kristen, I get it. I understand. Elizabeth, is it only on Facebook? Well, yes, Elizabeth. First of all, everything that, of course, this live show is on YouTube. The Think Tank is on YouTube, but it is done with a private link that only the premium Patreon people get. And then there is a Think Tank group on Facebook for those people, so it's easy for me to communicate with them, and so it's also easy for Eric to do that now that he's doing on the ground. But you can't find it You can't get, you will get invited into it if you are a premium Patreon member. You can't search for it. You can't request to be in it because these people are paying to be in there. And that's why it's like an exclusive club. Anybody can be entered, but you have to be at a certain Patreon level. So that's how it works. I can answer that, Astra. Anybody's going to ask me a gun question, that question is going to be answered. Sheree says, but you don't have to be on Facebook to participate. No, there is no prerequisite that to be in the think tank or anything, you have to have a Facebook account. I don't want you to think that. I'm sure there are some people who are in the think tank but don't have Facebook accounts, so they aren't in the group. But most of the people who are premium Patreon members do have Facebook accounts, and that's why I put together that group so I could communicate with them in an area, in a place where most of them are. But yes, you do not have to have a Facebook account to be a Patreon member and get everything that that is offered. Absolutely not. And in fact, with Zoom, which Eric is using for the On the Ground program, that's not affiliated with Facebook at all. So getting that, of course, being on YouTube here, free. Zoom, free. The issue is, though, that you have to be a premium Patreon member to take part in these programs that we offer. But I do want to assure you of one thing, that when it comes to all of these other things that many of you don't have access to, I just want to assure you that when it comes to the episodes, you aren't missing anything. It's not like we do the episode and then when we do the think tank, all this other information that I tell all of them. It's not like that at all. Any information that can be covered regarding a disappearance is included in the episodes every Friday. And that's the way it always will be. And access to the information for the episode, the actual factual information, everything will always be free. Always. Always. I know that there are other programs that only release some episodes through Patreon and everything. We don't do that. Every episode of the disappearances of anybody we cover from now to the end of time, those episodes will always be free. And any information on those disappearances will always be free, whether it's maps that I make or the videos that I've put up on YouTube for the last couple of disappearances. Those things will always be free. What these other people are getting isn't a chance to express their opinions, talk to me about the disappearances. Of course, at Patreon, I write about those, my opinions regarding the information that's covered on the episode. But I don't want you to ever think that I'm withholding information regarding a disappearance behind a paywall. I would never do that, ever. Ever. Okay? Ever. Astrid asked me, I know you shoot handguns. Do you also shoot long guns? Might be a weird question, but do you shoot both left-handed? Well, like I said, anytime I get a gun question, I'm going to answer it. Because I just have to. I do have, Astrid, two handguns. I have a Gen 3 Glock 19 that I take with me everywhere. I have had it for about over 4 years now. I got it in early 2016. And then February of last year, I got a Glock 43, which is also 9mm, but it's a smaller, slimmer, single stack 9mm gun that I like a lot, that I carry on special occasions. Whether it has to do with the clothes that I'm wearing at the time, because the Glock 19 is a little bigger. The Glock 43 is a little smaller. I also, sometimes when I'm out by myself, disc golfing, I will put that gun, the Glock 43, in my bag because I'm out there by myself. But then also in February of last year when I got the Glock 43, I also have an AR-15 that I got. It is an LE 6920, which is what they call a cop gun. If you were to see police that have AR-15s in their cars. It's the exact same model that they have. I got that in February last year. I had a red dot on it, but just recently I put a scope on it, and I love it. Love that. And that gun sits behind the bedroom door in my bedroom. And then I also have another gun ordered that I will be getting maybe before the end of the week. And that is what they call a Vepr 12, which is a semi-automatic shotgun. So I'm all into guns. Thank you, Applejack. I didn't even mention that we got the super chat going. Applejack's taking advantage of it, and I love the name. Applejacks love that cereal. Applejack says, thank you for everything you offer for free. Try to do that, Apple. I think that we have a nice mixture of a lot of free stuff and then some pay stuff. I think it's a good mixture. I think that when it comes to Patreon and the things we offer there, we offer as much, if not more, than anybody else out there. And it's a lot of, not just it's more, but it's kind of unique, which I think is important. We're not trying to copy anybody else. We're doing our own thing on Patreon between the blog, the think tank, the books, of interaction, the think tank, everything that, that goes on there is unique, that I don't think a lot of other podcasts or programs do. So we try not to be boring. I think, if people are going to be paying, whether $2 or $20 a month, we're trying to make it interesting. We're trying to make it engaging. And a lot of it is based upon people interacting, especially at the higher levels, getting their opinions heard, and their opinions making a difference. So I think it's more than you get anywhere else, my opinion. Thank you, Christine. Christine loves that super chat button. Hello, Christine. Elizabeth says, okay, I'm not active on Facebook, would like to join the think tank. Well, you can do that. You just have to go to patreon.com/unfound podcast, Elizabeth, and sign up at least $12 a month. That's where you have to go. And Cherie posted a link just a little bit earlier. Kristen says, I feel like I'm in the cool group. Well, we think you're cool, Kristen. Kristen says, I'm a reader and do love your blogs. Thanks, Kristen. I try to do a good job on them. I try to give maximum effort, 3,000 to 4,000 words. Sharman says, don't mess with Ed. Now that I just went, yes. Thank you, Apple. Thank you, Kristen. Paula says, I'm a little intimidated by my husband's AR. Maybe one day I'll try it. You should know, Paula. I know, and I just want everybody to, I'm not trying to be political. I know guns have become political. I'm not trying to be political. All right. I like guns because I like to protect myself. I am not an NRA member. I've never gone to any gun group rally or anything like that. I've never contributed to any Second Amendment causes and everything. I don't contribute to any political causes. Even when I was more political, I didn't. So I like guns because they offer me protection. And I think especially with what I do, just to be truthful, because of what we do at Unfound, there's a lot of people out there that hate us. And being that I'm the focal point, I started the program, I'm the guy that's on the camera and everything else. And it's very easy to find out where people live these days. I think that I have to, take that seriously. So that's all it is. That's all it is. I'm not going to force any ideology down anybody's throat or taking guns or anything else. But being that most of the people watching tonight are women, I love women who carry guns. I think every woman should carry a gun. Absolutely. I think it's even more important for women to have guns than men to have guns. And I'm a guy. So, but thank you for asking that question. But I can tell you, Polly, don't be intimidated by there is no recoil in those guns at all. No recoil at all. I'm sure you could shoot it great. Little practice, little showing you how to do everything. I'm sure you'd be a great shooter. Yes, Elizabeth, I know about the laws in New York City. Yes. Yeah, we're not going to get into that, Kristen. You know, I think it's just about protection. Like I said, I'm not going to go any past that. And I realize some people, you know, I know some of my friends who they're afraid to have guns in the house because they have kids and everything. I get it. I'm not going to argue with them. I'm not going to, I just know what I need to do for me. And every gun that I have is going to fulfill a specific purpose in my life. I don't collect guns. I'm not a gun person. I look at what I think I need for what I do. And that's just how I'm not going to have a gun safe with 100 guns in there. That's just not me. I just get them for where I think I'm going to be, what I think I can do, and what I think could happen. So there's that. So I talked about on the ground. Being that somebody already posted this, I will answer that right now. What about Madeleine McCann? What am I to think of this? I just want you to know that I'm not an expert on that. I think I've admitted when her name has come up before that I didn't even take a lot of interest in it when it happened. Maybe because it was in a different country. Maybe because, I don't know. Maybe because maybe just personally, I think that maybe it even shows with Unfound that my tendencies tend to go toward adult missing people than children. I think that's kind of the way, and there are reasons maybe behind that, especially when the way we conduct the program. So I'm not an expert on it. I'm not going to sit here and say that I am, but I'll just give you the general statement. After all these years, to believe that there's some new suspect or something, I'm not saying it's impossible. You know, it's certainly possible. I mean, I'm not saying it's like we're going to try to travel faster than the speed of light. Now, that's impossible, at least the way we understand physics in the 21st century. I'm not saying it's impossible, but I think what I'm saying is it's probably somewhat improbable. And I'm sure there's some story about why they didn't. I don't know. Having read the story that Cherie sent me earlier today, I just don't have a lot of confidence in it. I just don't. The guy had a car and then he sold it to somebody else right after. I don't know. I just don't know. I'm suspicious of most of these things. This strikes me as no different than just a couple weeks ago when we were talking about Julie Weflin's disappearance and John Paulos. I love the guy. I think he's a great guy. I think he's a fabulous guy. I can't wait to meet him someday. A lot of people need to be like him. But on the other hand, I will tell you, I'm not going to believe an eyewitness who comes forward after 30 years. I'm just not going to put much weight on what that person has to say just because it's been 30 years and the story that this guy told. But John, on the other hand, believes him. I do not. So I feel the same way about Madeleine McCann, that it's not impossible that this might actually be the right guy, but it's certainly not very probable. But I hope that I hope that her disappearance gets solved. I hope she's alive. I hope one day she is brought back to her parents, a healthy young woman, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. But this doesn't strike me as something that is believable. And I also have to keep in mind that the standards of media in other countries are different than our own. I know we have a lot of complaints about the American media, but my perception is that in other countries, and where this was coming out, it was a BBC article. They tend to be more sensationalistic than even American media is, especially when it comes to disappearances. Their media, it's a little more tabloidish than ours. They go these kinds of stories. Sometimes it feels a little closer to like what we know about the National Enquirer, my opinion. So we'll just have to see. It could be totally wrong. I'm not an expert on it. I don't know any more than any of you do. In fact, I probably know less. But from a missing person standpoint, just generalizing some things, I think there's reason to think that this is just not real. It's just another, just grasping at straws all these years later. Let's see. Okay. Kristen says, how do you leave your babies in a hotel room by themselves? Cultures are different. Once again, Kristen, I don't know. I'm not a parent. I'm just not going to get into that. It doesn't sound like to me like a smart thing to do, but I'm not a parent, so I'm not going to try to, what would they say? Mansplain, something like that. Elizabeth says it wasn't a car. It was a camper. Thank you. Kristen, they crucified that family. And Cherie says they certainly did. They did. That's my perception too. It seemed like the authorities there went after the family simply because they didn't have any other answers. And even I will say that, my attitude, having just said this, that there's a reason we don't cover children's disappearances on Unfound, because oftentimes the parents are the guilty ones. That doesn't mean they always are. I think that you still have to look at the facts and see if they make sense to you. To my knowledge, they were never able to break the parents' alibi that they were somewhere having dinner and she was there by herself. I don't think that was ever broken. So if that's the situation, I don't know how you can continue to claim they did something to their little girl. It just seemed to me that they were scrambling like a lot of law enforcement agencies in the United States do. When they can't figure something out, they scramble too and start pointing fingers. So I don't know. Apple says, I'm glad you don't cover children. Well, it's not it is a conscious choice. I'm not saying we've covered several children on this program. Kimberly Norwood, for example. We've covered many of them, but it has to be under certain circumstances that we cover them. And especially because you're going to be talking to the parents or a sister, and you don't want to get into a situation where after the fact you start thinking, did I just interview the person who caused this little girl's disappearance? And it's hard to tell in many children's disappearances. So we make a conscious effort to kind of stay away from them. But if a family comes to us and their little girl or little boy went missing and we hear the factual information and we really believe that we can cover the case and not think we're allowing somebody to get away with the disappearance, then we'll do it. It's just hard to do that. It's just very difficult. You have no idea. Cherie says, I'm not an expert either, but I do not believe it was her parents. Never have, Cherie says. This guy might be a convenient way to wrap everything up. Could be. Pamela says, we had a missing person case in Warren. Cheryl Coker, her remains were found a few months ago. Her husband said she just vanished. He was charged with her murder later. Yeah. A lot of that happening, Pamela. We've covered Mikkel Biggs. That's another one. Certainly true. I have not heard of Holly Clark in Hamilton. No, I've not. Although I know Hamilton, Canada, Christine. I've been there, actually. No, I'm not familiar with that. Yes, you're right. Cultures are different, Kristen. You're right. Pamela says sometimes life is stranger than fiction. Certainly true. Apple says, I like the mystery of a disappearance and the complicated lives that lead up to it. That is certainly true, Apple. It does seem that a lot of these people who disappear, they do have complicated lives. And that's why I think the number one reason of disappearance is relationships that get complicated. It's true. Let me answer another question. Gina or Gianna, Jeanna, in the group asked me, what is your most impactful memory related to Unfound? Well, I know that right away. My most impactful memory is, and I've said this before, and I'll say it again, and I think this will always be true, that my most impactful memory regarding Unfound is that the last real conversation I had with my mother before she was put on a ventilator and everything else that eventually led to her death was about Unfound. That's my most impactful memory when I think of Unfound. And that's why I continue to say that I do this program and in memory of her. My dad, to be honest, kind of takes an interest in it. Not a lot, not really his kind of thing. Whereas my mother loved the ID channel. She loved the show Forensic Files. She was really into that stuff even before I started Unfound. And the last conversation I had with her was about Unfound. She was already in the hospital and she could still talk, but you could just tell, well, things aren't that great. And so that is my most impactful memory. And that's what I think of when I think about Unfound. So that's the answer, Gina. I hope that's I hope that answers your question. Let me see if I got any other questions here so we can move on to some other things. Let me see if I got any questions over on the page. Doesn't look like it did. Okay. Let's move on. Now, something else that has come up, and if you got the newsletter, you know about it, but I'm going to talk about it right now anyway, is that, and I can't go into all the specifics and everything, but I think I'll give you enough information. I think maybe I already talked about this a couple weeks ago, but surprisingly, a few weeks ago, I was talking, Missy Phillips, Dow Phillips's wife, contacted me saying that she heard a rumor or something like that Dow was still alive, her husband, and he was living in a town, I'll just say what it is, Rocky Top, Tennessee. And he had been doing so for the last 9 years. And that, what I thought about that, we talked about it. In fact, we've talked about it a couple times since then, since he originally contacted me. And he was allegedly seen by himself, showed up to an event, we'll just call it that, a gathering, that he showed up to of his own free will. Wasn't forced to be there. And allegedly people saw him, and this got back to Missy. Now, before I go any further, I want you to know this is very much like just when I talked about Cameron Remmer. I hope that Dow Phillips is alive. I hope that he is fine. But surely I think he owes, if he still is out there, I certainly believe he owes his wife and his daughter an explanation as to why he left. And I hope that, even though I've said on more than one occasion that I did not believe that Dow Phillips was still alive, I kind of lean toward the idea that he walked off, as I think that we go longer and longer into Unfound's existence, the more I tend to believe that there may be a few more walk-offs than we think. So, but this got back to Missy. She asked me about it, and I want you to know we're in the process of trying to figure out if this is true. I can't tell you any more than that and what we're doing and everything, because I don't want to create a scrum, a frenzy as people start to look these things up and, maybe even take things into their own hands. And I don't want to go in that direction. But it was a get together where people would have been that would have known Dow. And we're going to try to contact some of these people to see if he was actually there. You have to understand that Dow's family, his biological family, the Phillipses, did not really care for the interview that I did with Missy. They contacted me. They contacted her saying that she's a liar and saying a lot of nasty things about her. And I have to tell you, I've never met Missy in person, but I mean, really, to me, she seems like one of the nicest people who've ever been on the program. She seems to be in genuine pain over Dow going missing. I don't believe she had anything to do with his disappearance. On and on and on. But there's something about her that Dow's side of the family didn't like, and doesn't like. Why? I'm not sure. So, but they have said some things, and I have to admit, there's a part of me that is leaning toward the idea that they're creating these things out of thin air just to make Missy feel bad. But I'm open to any information that comes in. And should we contact some of these people that were at this gathering and they say, oh, yeah, he was there, then I guess we're going to have to start believing that he was there and that he did walk off and that he has been living somewhere else. And people have known this and have kind of kept it quiet. Maybe not, maybe it was kind of like hiding in plain sight. I don't know. I just don't know what to think right now. But I just don't know. But I just want you to know that we're working on that. And hopefully we'll have an answer for you soon. It just is for me, it's just a little hard to imagine that Dow knows that he walked off. He knows that his wife and his daughter think he's missing. And then he's not that far away from where they're living. And he's just showing up somewhere at a public gathering where a bunch of people are supposed to know him. And he just shows up like it's nobody's, big deal, even though he knows that probably by now that his wife Missy was on Unfound just a few years ago. It seems a little weird, but maybe. So we're working on that. And if we make any headway on it, you all, of course, Missy will be the first to know, and then we'll have to decide how it should be presented to the public. But if I can say anything more about it, I will. Kristen says, my favorite actor is Johnny Depp. I remember you used to have this poster. I still have his poster, Kristen. I still have the picture, and it is on the wall right before you go into my bedroom in my new place. Yeah, that picture's huge. Kristen says, no disrespect. I didn't know you would go into your mom. I feel bad. No, you don't have to feel bad. I'll talk about my mother anytime you want to talk about her. She was a big fan of Unfound. She was happy that I found something that after watching me for years and years and years, bebop from this and bebop to that. And she was happy to see that her son finally found something where he thought he belonged. And it is because of my mother that I am able to do the program now these days the way we do it. So she is to be thanked all the time for Unfound's existence. Sheree, also, Kristen, factoring in both parents were doctors makes them somewhat removed from the realities of the horrible things that can happen when you leave your child unsupervised. Talking about McCann. Yes. And Sheree says, like Madison Bell. Paula, did no one at this gathering that knew him think to say, hey, what's going on? Thought you were missing. Paula, good question. I don't know. We're going to try to find out, Paula. We'll see. Kathy says, that's what I think. I'll believe Dow's alive when it can be proven. Me too. Yeah. Kristen says, I seriously think there should be a class on identifying kidnappers. Well, that would be an interesting class. I don't know how you'd conduct that, but it sounds interesting to me. Kristen. Let me just do this. This isn't, okay. Let me just cover a couple more things. If you have any additional questions that you'd like me to answer, now would be a good time to get those in. And let me just check out some things here, see if we got any more questions while the program has been going on in the question section of the group. Talking like Chandler Bing there. I wanted to also, this is kind of how things go sometimes. Suzanne Morphew, who disappeared from Colorado. How long has it been? Like a month now? And I don't know if you saw this, but her husband was secretly recorded by a guy who went from Iowa, I think, to Colorado, tracked Barry, her husband, down, had a secret camera and talked to him. And her husband did not say anything incriminating. He made the comment that he thinks that she got kidnapped. And I think during this video, he pointed to an area where her bike was found. So somebody, I think, tried to make an attempt to try to get him on the record saying something incriminating, and he didn't do so. And of course, it's been how long now, and his alibi that he was in Denver hasn't been broken. But it is just amazing, how many rumors were out there where her husband's already in custody and these other two guys are in custody. I got a couple emails like that, and it ended up all being total BS. And this is why we at Unfound, we don't care about being first. We only care about being right. And although we may get things wrong, we're not going to get things wrong because we act too quickly on something. And I'm certainly glad that when I got some of these emails, and these are people who have been contacted by me before, that I didn't act on it and just go right to the Facebook group and say, hey, guess what I heard? This just shows you how information can spin out of control. Rumors get started. People want to believe things just because they sound true. But Barry Morphew is still a free man. Now, I will tell you this, being that she hasn't been found yet, being that he isn't in jail yet, these things happen. People, women mainly, do get attacked while they're out riding their bikes. They do get attacked when they're out jogging. And we've seen enough videos on YouTube to know how quickly those things can happen. Very quickly. We think it takes 5 minutes to snatch somebody off the street. It doesn't. It takes 30 seconds, if not less. So there is the possibility that she was riding her bike. Some car maybe came up alongside her, knocked her into a ditch. Guy, man or men, jump out of the car, get her. Maybe she's already injured. Throw her into the car and take off. That would not take a lot of time. It wouldn't. But on the other hand, I start thinking about What are the odds that this happened while her husband was out of town? Now, I realize maybe he has a job that he goes to different cities, and maybe he's gone well over 50% of the time. I don't know what that is. I don't know what that percentage is, but it does figure into my calculations of all this. And I'm going to add in this. Maybe it's just because I'm a guy and, maybe I'm being sexist here. But Suzanne Morphew was an attractive woman. Her husband's out of town. Her daughters are out of town. Are we sure that she just wasn't having an affair and something went wrong? And I think about the bike and I start thinking, could that have been staged? And I just want you to know that's the way I'm leaning right now because of that. Now, it may be that new information comes out tomorrow that could totally take me in a different direction. But the odds of her encountering some attacker out on the street, although it happens, the odds of that happening very low. What are the odds that she would disappear while her husband and her daughters are out of town, which might have been the only time this whole year that was going to happen? So, no. We also have to remember when this is going on during all this COVID stuff, people self-isolating. And we've heard about the statistics about how the divorce rate has gone up, more people going to see divorce lawyers. And that all figures into how I think about this disappearance. I want her to be alive. But I think at this point, this isn't something like Cherie just brought up with Madison Bell, where she just want to get out of her life. I have to believe that if Suzanne Morphew was leaving her husband, leaving her kids, that she would have let at least her daughters know that she was okay by this time. Being that she hasn't, leads me to believe that I think that there was mighty be some two-timing, another lover, something else going on, and something went on that way. Maybe it was even with this neighbor that we hear about, that she was seen biking, but then she wasn't. And then this is the person that coordinated with the daughters, called this neighbor. I don't even know if this neighbor's a man or a woman, but that's where I go with this. But like I said, I don't know any more than any of you do. And it very well may be that if she's missing still a year from now, that the disappearance may end up on Unfound. Maybe. And then we'll probably know more then than we do now. And we'll probably know about things behind the scenes that were going on now that we don't know about, that won't be exposed, maybe until sometime down the road. But I just want you to know that's the way I'm leaning with her disappearance. Just looking at the times, looking at, the time of year and who wasn't at home and she was by herself. Okay. So just wanted to let you know that I'm thinking about that. I wouldn't say that I've been really following it, but being that I saw that this person tried to get Barry, her husband, to kind of incriminate himself, ask him all these questions and everything. He's out there looking for his wife. He's doing more than most of these guys. He's doing more than Austin Sleeper did. He's doing more than John Parra did. He's doing more than Christy Nichols' husband did. So I think that we need to give him some credit in that area, being that we do all now know about disappearances where it looks much different, where the husband clams up. He doesn't go any searches. He's not helpful with the police, on. And he has some, story that not many people believe. Barry Morphew doesn't sound like that. He has an alibi that seemingly hasn't been cracked yet. He's out there trying to find his wife. He's out there. That's why he was out there, and that's why that person was talking to him. So he certainly looks a lot better than a lot of these other men who we consider to be suspects in the disappearances we cover on Unfound. Kristen says, I have two boys who always thought kidnappers take girls. Well, they take boys too. Jacob Wetterling. Apple says, could you interview Emma Filipoff's mom and get an update on that case? I know it's already gotten a lot of attention, but I'd really like to hear an update on her search. Unless we would cover the actual disappearance, Apple, that's probably the only way that I would get to talk to Emma's mother, unless she was willing to come on the program. But I have to admit, off the top of my head, I don't know much about it. I'm not going to just call somebody up so I can talk to them so I can come back to all of you with the information. That's not really what I do. If I'm talking to a family, I want them to be on the program so we can take a deep interest in the overall disappearance and trying to help. I'm not going to contact somebody just so I can give an update to all of you. That sounds a little bit selfish. Cherie says, also possible that he's not going to tell the truth to some random asking questions. Very possible, Cherie. Very possible. Cherie says, I don't know what happened. Trying to stay out of that rabbit hole of Suzanne's case. Can't keep up with the ones I'm in. Either way, Barry is gross. Why is Barry gross? Tell us why Barry is gross, Cherie. Elizabeth, has her family hired a private investigator? I don't know, and I hope not, given my attitude toward them these days. Cherie says Chris Watts was helping also. Deli says 3:25 a.m. just woke up in the UK to finally catch a bit of Ed live. Yippee. Hey, yeah, we're here. We are here, Deli, and it is 10:27 Eastern time in the United States. Elizabeth, Johnny Gosh. Elizabeth, I will tell you, we've made an attempt to cover that disappearance, but truly, Johnny's mother's not talking much these days. I know she used to. I know that she has a story. This is the story about how he came to visit her, right? I don't know what to think of that, but I don't know how much she's really talking. But we've made I've made an attempt. I know Emily has made an attempt, and we just have not gotten any response from her. She's from Canada, went missing in Victoria. Okay, Apple, thank you. Cherie's laughing for some reason. Apple, now I want you to cover the disappearance. I just meant an updated coverage. We could do that, Apple, for sure. And we do, of course, cover Canadian disappearances. We love our neighbors to the north. We could certainly make that happen. I'll talk to Emily about it. I promise you. Kristen says, I wish you did more cases from the East Coast. Well, I've done a few, quite a few here in Florida. We've done quite a few in North Carolina, Kristen. We just did one in Pennsylvania. We've done a few in New York. There are certainly some states where we haven't covered a disappearance yet. This Friday, we're going to go to Virginia. So we're doing what we can, Kristen. We take the cases as they come and the guests that we find. In fact, I will tell you, I talked to the sister of a missing young woman today. This woman went missing in North Carolina. So I think that you're going to get a North Carolina case probably sometime within the next month to 6 weeks. So we're working on it, Kristen. I feel like they all seem to be from Texas. We've certainly covered a lot from Texas, Kristen, but you have to remember that Texas is the second most populous state. So it's going to stand to reason that Texas gets a lot of coverage, whereas Wyoming, that doesn't have a lot of people, we've only covered one disappearance from there that I can think of, Renee Yeargain. Montana doesn't have a lot of people there. We've only covered one. I'm glad we've covered one from Montana. So that's just kind of the way it works out, Kristen. Yeah, Noreen, severely traumatized. You're right, Elizabeth. You're right, Kristen. I think of the East Coast as like Massachusetts. Well, Massachusetts is not a very big state, and there's not a lot of people that live there, Kristen. And, the other, of course, people think Massachusetts, they think of Maura Murray, but otherwise, I really don't know how many disappearances are in Massachusetts. I know. That's okay, Kristen. Tree says, hello from Lassen Park area of California. I don't know where that is, Tree. And I think you're new. Please tell us where that is in California. I've been to California many times, but just Southern California. You're right. She did go missing from New Hampshire, Kristen, but she was from Massachusetts and she drove up to New Hampshire. Right. Same thing. New Hampshire. Not a lot of people there. But once again, if we happen upon somebody, we are not discriminatory. We haven't covered a disappearance in Hawaii yet. Now, the weird thing is we've covered 2 disappearances in Alaska. There's not many people there either. Just the way it works out sometimes. Elizabeth with a $5 super chat. Thank you. She wants this to be read for sure. Totally random, but my theory is that Tammy Leppert was in the witness protection program and started an entirely new life, possibly still alive. Well, Elizabeth, I would hope that that's true. I don't believe that, and I'm not the expert on the case. I would refer to my good buddy Anthony at Crime Blogger 1983 as being the expert. I don't think he believes that either, but I could hope. I could certainly hope that is true. She seemed to have a lot of things going on in her young life, and maybe. Tree says Lassen Park, my Shasta, full of paranormal activity and missing people. Well, we'd just stick to the missing people, Tree. Mount Shasta. Yeah, we'll just stick to the missing people there. We'll let somebody else handle the paranormal activity. Annette, I'm in Montana. Not a lot of crime, but it's changing as the population grows. Yeah. Yes, Sheree is like she's saying here, unfoundpodcast@gmail.com. If you have any case suggestions, please send them to me. We're always looking for them. The windows are totally open. The mailbox is always open for suggestions. Now, however, I should say this to make it more likely that we would cover a disappearance that you'd like to see featured and to do an interview with a mother, father, whoever. It helps if you actually know a way to contact those people. What we don't want is somebody just randomly sending a long list of disappearances that you think we should cover. That I'm not saying it's a waste of time. I'm just telling you the cases that are going to get covered most likely are the ones where you say, you know what? I know this disappearance. I have seen the mother do an interview. I think she's on Facebook. Here's her account. Here's her email address. That makes it much more likely that that case will get covered. However, on the other hand, if you just send something saying, I wish you'd cover this long list of cases, and that's it, that's going to be a little tougher to do. You got a new phone, Sheree. Okay, well, that's cool. Hello, Paula. Paula also with the super chat. Thank you, Paula. Thank you very much with the super chat. We're trying to do our best. Yes, it is, Sheree. It is heartbreaking. One more thing, and we're going to go for the case for this Friday. The other thing I want to talk about, being that Vanessa Guillen was in the news, and I guess she's still in the news, being that she disappeared from Fort Bragg. We had another Fort Bragg soldier that went missing on May 22nd. His name is Enrique Roman Martinez. And so that maybe could be a little suspicious, but I think you have to understand that he did not disappear from the base. He disappeared when he was at Shackleford Banks, which I think there's a lake there. And just this past weekend, a body was found in the lake. It's not been positively identified as Enrique yet, but it is, I don't know if it's a coincidence or not, that he's at this park or at this lake, and then he goes missing, and then like a week later, they find a body in the lake. So I think what I'm saying here is I don't believe Vanessa going missing and Enrique going missing, even though they're from the same base, even though it seems that they're the same ethnicity. And maybe I guess it very well could be that they knew each other. I guess maybe if they were both soldiers there, I guess they might have a chance of running into each other once. At this point, it just doesn't feel to me like the two are related. She disappeared seemingly from the base, whereas he disappeared off the base. He's a guy, she's a woman. We have this body that's now been found. And of course, with Vanessa, still no word on anything. She seemingly just walked right off of her post and gone. So it just doesn't feel to me at this point that they are related. But once again, we're always open to new information here. And once again, Paula, thank you for the super chat and thank you for the nice words. Let's see anything else here. Hold on. I have to do this right-handed. My Cameron, just want to make sure we got everything covered here. Okay. Let's go to the disappearance for this week. Kristen, you'll be glad to know that Unfound is taking everybody to the state of Virginia on Friday. Technically, not the state of West Virginia, but West Virginia, little w, capital V, West Virginia, not the state West Virginia. We're taking you to Hazel Mountain, Virginia, with the disappearance of Rodney Kiser. This is a disappearance that happened on April 26th, 1990. And the interview will be with his niece, Marlene Gullett. Now, I had mentioned maybe last week or the week before that these last few weeks, or the upcoming weeks, at least at the time, were going to be with interviews with people who I had been in contact with for quite a while. And suddenly we were able to make things happen. Of course, that happened with John Polos, and then last week with Joanne and Shirley. And now this week with Marlene. I think Marlene and I spoke once back in 2018, maybe even earlier than that. And just couldn't make anything happen. I really don't remember what the circumstances were that we didn't get together. But then just happened to contact each other again. I think maybe it was through, I forget exactly how it happened, but Marlene and I started talking again. And we will be covering the disappearance of her uncle, Rodney, who disappeared. He was 32 years old at the time. And it is an episode I am calling Playing with Fire. Because even though I think Rodney was a good guy, it doesn't sound like he was into drugs, didn't have a criminal record, but he was making a few decisions in his private life that could have led to his disappearance. Ultimately, it will be for you to decide what you think happened to him. But the general facts is on the evening of April 26th, 1990, his family kind of just lived in this, like within a half mile of each other in this little place of Hazel Mountain. And it was actually Marlene's mother who saw Rodney drive by in his truck. Didn't know where he was going, no big deal. But then he went missing. And when his girlfriend, whose name is Veronica, was contacted later, when he didn't show up, he ran this country store and he wasn't there the next day to open it up, and people start wondering what's going on. His girlfriend said that he was driving to see his brother who lived on the entire opposite end of Virginia in Alexandria, Virginia. Well, the brother said, I have no idea what you're talking about. I had no plans to see him. I didn't know he was coming to see me. That's all news to me. Well, what you should know about Veronica is that even though she and Rodney were living together at the time, she was still married. And on top of that, before they even became a couple, Rodney had a run-in with her father, in which he allegedly, there were no witnesses to this, but Rodney said it happened, where Charlie, Veronica's father, shot the tires out on Rodney's truck. And then this was the woman that he decided to start dating and then live with. And then on top of that, she ended up having a child. And on the birth certificate, she was not sure who the father was. She listed her husband at the time. She listed Rodney at the time. And she listed some other guy who could have been a possibility. So it seems that she wasn't just, and it seems like her husband knew. I mean, she wasn't living at home anymore. She was living with Rodney. So it seems that she wasn't just being with Rodney or cheating on her husband. It seems that she was cheating on Rodney too. So you can see, I think, why I am calling this episode Playing with Fire. When you start dating women who are married and you start dating women whose fathers hate you, and you start dating women who are with multiple guys and everything, it could be a recipe for disaster. And that's why I'm calling it Playing with Fire. However, that doesn't mean that any of that had anything to do with his disappearance. Now, the other maybe the most unique part about Rodney's disappearance is, for once, we're going to get to talk a little bit about forensics. Because his truck was found eventually just right down the road, nowhere near Alexandria, Virginia. And it was at this trailer that he owned that he was trying to fix up. He wasn't living there at the time, but inside the trailer, there were blood drops that people believe to be Rodney's. That would make a lot of sense, being that it was his trailer. But the problem was that, of course, at the time, DNA wasn't a thing yet. And when they did try to test the DNA, the blood later, when DNA became a science, it was too degraded. But it was B positive, and it very possibly could be Rodney's blood. So we have at least, we don't talk about blood much on Unfound because we really don't talk about forensics. We usually don't have them. But this Friday, you will hear about that, and you'll have to judge for yourself. It wasn't like a big puddle of blood, just splotches here and there, and you'll have to decide for yourself what that means. Renee says there's a petition to sign to help get her case seen. Please sign if possible. You mean Emma's, Renee? Is that who you mean, Emma's? I'm guessing that's what you mean. But that is the disappearance for this Friday. Rodney Kiser, a guy who was a former sheriff's deputy, and he was running a small country store at the time of his disappearance. Once again, he disappeared from Hazel Mountain, Virginia, April 26th, 1990. The guest will be his niece, Marlene Gullett. She is in the discussion group. And the episode is called Playing with Fire. So that's all I have for tonight. Covered a lot of stuff. First and foremost, I gave a shout out to JoJo, who does who keeps a notebook on all Unfound's cases. So I guess that means this Friday he'll be writing in his notebook about Rodney Kiser. We talked about the camel and where that comes from. We talked about Cameron Remmer and this guy. There's still no information on whether this guy in San Francisco is Cameron or not. Talked about the newsletter. Talked about On the Ground. Next one's probably going to be June 15th. Talked about Dow Phillips. Talked about Enrique Roman Martinez. Talked about the Suzanne Morphew disappearance. Took a bunch of great questions tonight from you in the group watching, and then from the group. And then finally, as always, we talked about this coming Friday's disappearance, the disappearance of Rodney Kiser. Pamela says, I was wrong about Cheryl Coker's husband. He was named a suspect, but not charged. Her family is seeking justice. Okay. We're always ready to cover any disappearances that you send us at unfoundpodcast@gmail.com. Like I said, though, I just want to make sure that you just aren't sending a huge list. These are the case. Stick to a couple. And if you have any contact information, please include it. Okay. That's what I would recommend. Don't send us a list of 20. Send 2 with contact information. That'll make it very probable that we will feature that disappearance sometime in the future. Once again, before you go, please like this video, this show that you're watching, that you've watched tonight. Please give this a like, a thumbs up. And anything else, if you're not subscribed to the Unfound Podcast channel yet, please do. Of course, you'll get automatic alerts when we post new videos. In fact, I'm thinking about doing a video for Rodney Kiser's disappearance. I haven't decided upon that yet, but if I do, you'll know. And I will see you later. You'll hear me on Friday. But good night, everyone. Thank you for watching. Hope you always enjoy these Wednesday nights. I truly, of course, enjoy them, getting to talk to all of you. And I enjoy doing the show. An hour and 45 minutes tonight. So have a great night. Take care out there. Be safe. Good night.